Hello and welcome to DFS Coach Talk. It's Wednesday, January 26th, 2022. I'm Andrew Hanson alongside Josh Crash Davis, and we're here for Championship Sunday. We've got the AFC Championship game at 3 o'clock, NFC Championship game at 6:30. And Crash, is there any possible way that these two games can live up to the four games we had last weekend?
I don't think it's possible. That was the most insane weekend of playoff football I've ever seen. I mean, every game coming down to the last second, the last, possession, the last, just the last everything. So,
It was epic. And at the very least, we have some rematches here. So very, lots of intrigue, and I'm excited about it. It's a terrific weekend. You're
mhm.
you're certainly ready for the occasion with your new Coach Talk gear, looking sharp.
Yeah.
So that's good. We were contemplating having a three-man booth this week, but Omaha Joe had to call an audible, so he won't be on tonight. But we wanted to get this out here midweek to get everybody ready because it's a mixture of slates. We're going to focus on the two-game slates here as we break this down, but of course we'll have the showdown lineups for our members as well, covering DraftKings, FanDuel, and Yahoo. But let's jump right into the first game here, Crash. AFC Championship and rematch of what another epic game when Burrow threw for 446 and
Mhm.
four touchdowns in that 34-31 win over the Chiefs, and Chase had 266 yards receiving and three touchdowns. Really memorable day for Cincinnati. Helped keep them on that track to eventually win the division,
Mhm.
get that first playoff win in decades. And man, they're going to be fired up throughout Ohio here for this one. Now, what are the chances they can match that? I probably not, but Kansas City, the thing about their defense is
Mhm.
second half of the season they were much better,
Yeah.
but lately, they've been pretty vulnerable through the air.
Mhm. Yeah.
There was obviously that game was enormous. What Buffalo did last week was very impressive. They just couldn't stop them, and really, they've scored touchdowns. They've given up touchdowns in about every single way you can in terms of
Mhm.
the secondary. Guys tripping, miscommunications, getting beat deep. They've really been struggling here. So I think Cincinnati is in a pretty good spot. I really like their passing attack here, and it is the best way to attack the Chiefs. They've given up the third most fantasy points to quarterbacks. So I really do like Burrow again here. I like that he's cheaper than Mahomes. This is
Mhm.
obviously the uh, projected to be a higher scoring game here. 54.5 is the total. KC favored by 7.
Yeah.
But I like Burrow here a lot. 6,600 on DraftKings. Mahomes is 74, and he's 1,300 cheaper on FanDuel. Um, I'm really thinking about him as my cash quarterback this week. What do you think about that?
I think that's going to be a contrarian play. I think Mahomes is going to get most of the ownership. I'm leaning more towards Mahomes personally. Just feel like he's in a heck of a groove right now. And I don't really think that Cincinnati is going to do that much to slow that down. So I definitely like Mahomes, but, I could definitely see, Burrow, the way that defense has struggled, their secondary. I mean, Gabriel Davis almost put up numbers like Jamar Chase did. So, it's just been crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I do trust Mahomes. I just don't know if I want to pay that extra price. So we'll talk about it as you break down the Chiefs. The other thing I want to talk about with Burrow is last week. If you just look at the fantasy points, you might think, well, he didn't quite do it. But let's not
Mm-hmm.
forget he threw for 348 yards against Tennessee. He just didn't have any passing touchdowns. Mixon had that rushing touchdown, and then it was a field goal fest. So I think he'll bounce back and throw for multiple touchdown passes. And the next challenge is going to be which guy to pick.
Mm.
Chase is obviously ultra dynamic. Went for over 100 yards against Tennessee again, but Higgins actually out targeted him.
Right.
And I could see Higgins running some routes like Davis, some long, in routes, and
Mm-hmm.
Chase. If you watch the tape when they played before, really he was more up the sideline,
Yeah.
just the deep routes. he did catch that one. He kind of cut across the field, but he won some one-on-one battles. And the other thing here is in that game, I thought KC did a decent job on some of the one-on-one coverage with Ward against Chase, and it just so happened that Burrow made good passes and Chase won the 50-50 balls. And I don't think we
Right.
can expect him necessarily to do that again. So I think Higgins has a chance to pay off and return better value than Chase.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing here is you can't really ignore that it seems that Burrow is going to Chase here early and often and kind of, getting started with him, getting into a rhythm. And Higgins is sort of that secondary option. So when push comes to shove, I do think he'll target Chase. But what do you think about those two? Because that's the other hard thing to do is I can't see myself putting a lineup out there without one of these receivers. But we got to figure out which one.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's going to come down to, if you're going to pay up for Chase or Hill or Samuel, those would be the main three guys I think that you'd want to pay up. And then of course, Cooper Kupp, kind of in his own category, almost price wise. So, one of those three guys, I'm probably leaning more towards Tyreek Hill than Jamar Chase, but I could definitely see where he has another big game. I think people are going to chase that game a little bit, no pun intended.
Right.
So hopefully he won't have that monster game, and my contrarian play will be, the right move. I'm hoping.
Okay. Well, we've got Boyd and Uzama to consider as well, and Cincinnati. Just looking back here and thinking things through, their offense has really been consolidated, kind of like the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
Where, it's really just those three receivers, Chase, Higgins, and Boyd, and Uzama. Sample hasn't been targeted in a couple weeks. And then you've got Mixon. So that's the good thing is easier to zero in on the options compared to Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
When they get in the red zone, there's like 12 different things that can happen.
Right.
Out of about 25 different formations.
For sure.
But Boyd is another guy to consider. 4,200 on DraftKings, nice price for PPR. Didn't do too much last week. He only got 3 targets. I thought he would do more. There were a couple of plays where he was open and Burrow just went elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So the possibility was there. And if you look at what Beasley did last week against Kansas City in the slot, 6 for 60. So I do think there'll be opportunities for Boyd. Obviously, he's not as much of a touchdown upside guy, but the price is nice. So he's in my player pool.
Yeah.
Uzama, I was impressed with last week, 7 for 71. But KC's pretty solid against tight ends. In the regular season matchup, he was 4 for 32. So I would lean Boyd if you were going to pay down for one of those guys. And then Mixon, obviously a huge part of the offense, gets the vast majority of the touches. P. Ryan is just sort of an afterthought.
Yeah.
And Mixon, he got 7 catches against Kansas City in that regular season game, 6 catches last week against Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
So that's attractive on PPR, but 6,800 on DraftKings. If you go to him there, you probably have to sacrifice one of these big receivers that you just listed off.
Yeah.
Really, there's one on each team that we want. So I'm leaning towards the passing game and fading Mixon. Are you thinking similarly?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm actually in my tournaments anyway. I'm looking the opposite way. I kind of like Mixon because I think that Kansas City saw what Tennessee did. Getting after Burrow 9 times, they sacked him 9 times, and I think that Cincinnati will try and use that running game a little bit and try and protect Joe Burrow a little bit better in this game. So rely on the run, and then in the screen game too. I think Mixon could play a key role in that too. So
excellent. All right. Well, yeah, like you said, that's an important feature of this matchup is how does that offensive line do? They were not good against Tennessee. Pro Football Focus has them as a negative 29% pass blocking advantage. So thank you to our partners over there for everything they've done throughout this season and the playoffs. But I'm curious about your take on Kansas City. I know you follow them very closely, and they are the 7-point favorites here. They lost, that high scoring game in the regular season. Are they going to get revenge here and head to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I do think they are. I think that this is kind of feeling like 2019 all over again. They literally are possibly looking at a matchup with San Francisco once again. So everything's kind of fallen in line for that to happen. Their offense is really starting to find momentum like they did that year. With the added element of Jerick McKinnon, they just have another weapon. As if they need another weapon. They found one.
Right.
So they're not just relying on Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce like they were for a little while there. So that leads me to why I really like Patrick Mahomes. He's spreading the ball around. He's being very patient. Last time against Cincinnati in Week 17, he had a below-average game. He had 26 out of 35 completions for 259 and 2 touchdowns, only 20.9 DraftKings points. The last couple of weeks, he's had 40-point DraftKings points. He had 30 for 39 for 404 and 5 touchdowns against Pittsburgh. And then last week he had 33 for 44 for 378 and 3 touchdowns. Also had 7 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown on the ground for 43 DraftKings points against Buffalo. I don't know if he's going to get up to the 40s, but I think that the high 20s, low 30s is definitely, more than capable of doing that. So for cash, I'm definitely looking at Mahomes this week.
Yeah, I see your point there. It makes a lot of sense. He really did step up, didn't he? And he was aggressive on the ground, great diving touchdown on the ground. And then 13 seconds, he did exactly what he needed to do to get these guys into overtime. So if you run Mahomes out there, are you going to pair him up with a couple of those Chiefs pass catchers?
Yeah. And as I mentioned, I also like Jerick McKinnon, the way they're using him, especially in the passing game. He's getting like 7 targets a game lately. He wasn't as much a part of their offense in Week 17 when they played the Bengals the first time, or he really wasn't at all. I don't think he had any points that game.
Yeah, he didn't. He was out there, but he didn't have any touches because remember that was Darrell Williams when he was leading the charge. And he had 88 yards rushing and 2 scores. He caught 3 for 19. CEH didn't play. So that was back when Williams was the guy.
Yeah.
And man, how times have changed quickly.
Yeah. In just 3 weeks, basically, since then. He's had 14, 26, and 12 DraftKings points in their last 3 games. So at 5,100, it's a decent price. And he's going to be involved in the passing game, like I said, and the goal line and stuff like that. So definitely like Jerick McKinnon. Of course, Tyreek Hill. Cincinnati was dead, in the middle average against wide receivers this year, allowing the 16th most fantasy points. In Week 17, he was pretty well held in check. He only had 40 catches, but he was targeted 10 times. So I think if he gets that many targets, he's going to have a much bigger game this week. And then last week, against Buffalo, he had a huge game. He had 11 catches for 150 yards and that long 64-yard touchdown there to help send the game to overtime, and was targeted 13 times. So I do like Tyreek Hill. Byron Pringle, he is the 4,300 on DraftKings, so I like that price for him. He's definitely established himself as that third pass-catching option behind Hill and Kelce. And, I think that he's in a great spot, especially in tournaments. And then, of course, Kelce. Cincinnati's allowed the 6th most fantasy points to tight ends. He's 6,500 on DraftKings, so you do have to pay up for him a little bit. But I think that, he's going to be a key play for me. And he has the highest matchup advantage of any tight end this week with a 55% matchup advantage when he's up against Jermaine Pratt. So I do like Travis Kelce.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar with you on the skill position players. I do like McKinnon, especially on DraftKings because of those targets. I also like CEH. Last week McKinnon out-touched him against Buffalo. McKinnon had 10 carries and 5 catches. CEH only had 7 carries and 1 catch. But I thought he looked really good when he was running it.
Yeah.
7 carries for 60 yards. He had that one play at the goal line where he missed the little flip from Mahomes, which was probably, a mixture of rust and maybe not practicing enough recently. Also, Mahomes probably threw it to him a hair early. But just the way that he looked running the ball, I think is important here. KC actually has a 68% run blocking advantage, according to PFF this week, which is the number one advantage on the slate. So I like that. I also am thinking about McKinnon, where he had a couple of hiccups last week. He did fumble, and
Sure.
then remember that reception in the fourth quarter that he could have had, but he just stepped on the sideline. It kind of felt like is he a little bit nervous here? Is the moment a little bit too big for him? And I just think Andy Reid is going to put a little bit more trust back in CEH. So,
That makes sense.
Yeah. So, I kind of lean towards CEH as if I had to only play one. I am looking at a couple builds where I put them both out there. I think that KC certainly wants to keep the ball out of Burrow's hands. We know that they're terrific at passing it, and it's the better matchup for KC to pass it. But if they can run it, I think they will, and I think they'll try with CEH. And I don't. It's not like he's going to all of a sudden vault to 100% of the touches or even close, like a mix-in category.
Yeah.
So I think McKinnon will still be involved, but I do think CEH will have a bigger percentage of the touches here this week.
Yeah,
and then
I agree. And what you said is a good point about him fumbling and him possibly being a little bit too big of a moment.
Right
now it's even bigger because they're playing to go to the Super Bowl. So
can't get much bigger.
Yeah.
So with those pass catchers, to add on to what you said about Hill and the 40 yards, 6 catches in their first matchup, there was one of the targets. It was a long one, a deep pass that he just basically dropped. Easily could have been like a 50-yard reception. So I think the upside is there, as we saw again with Buffalo. And I think there are some weeks where Andy Reid just kind of schemes up special plays for guys like Pringle or Hardman. But with the Super Bowl trip on the line, this is where you use your best guys. And Hill is just the incredible weapon with ultimate speed. So I think he's got really big upside here in this matchup. And once again, for me, it's the question of Hill or Kelsey. I guess you could go with both of them in certain builds, but if you had to go with one, which way are you going?
If I had to go with one, I would lean with Kelsey. I just think that it's just a little bit more dependable for me than Tyreek Hill. We've seen games where he just kind of disappears, but Kelsey, for the most part, especially at home, he's been very consistent. So
yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. The cash approach with Kelsey. Gray is the value tight end who's gotten a little bit more involved. He's the one that ran that option play that didn't work.
Right.
He did have 2 catches against Buffalo, so if you wanted to punt the position, you could look there. But I also like Pringle, like you said, if you want to go cheaper for the KC side.
Yeah, and McCole Hardman too. I think those guys are both in play.
Yep. All right, before we hit to game 2, I just want to invite everybody to join us this weekend for lineups. Go to dfscoachtalk.com if you want to become part of the family, and we'll give out those lineups Sunday afternoon. But whenever you join, you'll get access to all of our sports. So we've got NBA going 7 days a week, PGA off and running, and MLB right around the corner. So check out the website. Any questions, you can reach out to us on Twitter at DFS Coach Talk. All right, game 2, Crash. It is the NFC Championship game, 6:30 Eastern on Sunday. 49ers and Rams have played twice before. 49ers have won both of those games, but now we've got the Rams as 3.5-point favorites, a much lower total here than the first game. It's 46. And you've got the 49ers side here for us. Are they going to go for 3 in a row, or you like the Rams side better?
I'm pretty torn on this game. It's 6 straight, that they've won against the Rams. San Francisco has, so it's hard for me to pick against them from that standpoint. But this Rams team, they went into Tampa. They pretty much blew out, the Bucs for most of that game. And then the Bucs came back, obviously, at the end. But that was a lot of LA messing up.
Yes, it was.
Back in the game. So, I think that this LA team right now is really hitting their stride, and I could definitely see them winning. But if they don't, I think it's going to go kind of like what the Week 18 game went, very close game, back and forth. And, guys like Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle, I could see those guys having a big game to put them over the top.
Yeah, it is hard to, pick against the 49ers with how they've done against the Rams, but I really like how the Rams are trending. But the funny thing about DFS is, even if the Rams win, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the best
Right.
fantasy plays. So talk to us about this 49er side from a DFS perspective.
I mean, everything they're doing right now kind of all starts and ends with Deebo Samuel. So he's 8,400 on FanDuel. He's 7,200 on DraftKings. Last time they played, he even threw for a touchdown. So, you got the element of surprise that, LA will be a little bit more aware of this time. So maybe that won't work if they try that again. But yeah, he threw a 24-yard touchdown to Juwan Jennings. He also had 8 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown in that game. Had 4 receptions for 95 yards on 6 targets. So had 29 DraftKings points. And then in week 10, he had 5 carries for 36 yards, a touchdown, and 5 catches for 97 yards and a receiving touchdown for 30 DraftKings points. So almost the same score in both games. And I would expect him to put up big numbers once again, as long as he's healthy enough. He is still dealing with that injury a little bit. So we'll have to see, how he looks out there. But assuming that he's ready to go, I would expect big numbers from Samuel again.
Yeah, that first matchup where you mentioned the 5 carries, 5 receptions, a touchdown both ways, that was really that coming out party that surprised the Rams.
Mm-hmm.
And, then they got another look at him at the end of the regular season.
Yeah.
And I do think that they've got to scheme better to try to limit him. This is their
Right.
third try. They've got some athletes. They've got Jalen Ramsey. Got to figure McVay and company will come up with something a little bit better because it's clear. They want to run the offense through for Deebo and Mitchell.
Right.
So that's a big question mark of can he do it again? And did everything he went through against Green Bay in the cold, all those hits, is he at 100% ready to put on another Deebo show?
Yeah. We'll have to see.
Yes, we will. Well, what about the rest of the offense?
Brandon Ayuk is 5,000 on DraftKings. He was held scoreless, basically wasn't a part of the offensive attack in Green Bay Saturday. But in week 18, he had 6 catches for 107 yards on 7 targets for 19.7 DraftKings points. So you could definitely look at Ayuk. Also Jennings, he's 3,200, so he's almost min price. He had a huge role in that game in week 18 when San Francisco came back and won. He had that catch on the touchdown pass from Samuel, but he also had 6 catches for 94 yards on 7 touchdowns and on 7 targets and 2 touchdowns for 27.4 DraftKings points. Little, buyer beware there because he didn't really do anything like that the rest of the season. So it could have just been, kind of that breakout game. And then he kind of goes back to what we saw from him most of the year. So that's a little bit of a cautionary tale there. And then George Kittle, he had 5 receptions for only 10 yards, but he was targeted 7 times in week 18, was also targeted 7 times in week 10. And, he was a pretty big part of the game plan last week in Green Bay. And I think that he'll probably be a big part again. And then in Showdown, I do like Robbie Gould. As much as that pains me to say, I do like Robbie Gould. So,
okay. I'll just add that, Jimmy G is still a little banged up with the thumb, and we know the passing volume hasn't been there lately because they want to run it so much. So that's the trade-off is, do you get one of those standout performances like Ayuk and Jennings had in that end of the regular season matchup, or is it just more ball control, less volume, so they don't get there? But certainly an attractive price for a guy like Jennings on 3,200 with that sort of upside. We've talked about Deebo and his involvement in the rushing game. Any interest in Mitchell or Kyle Juszczyk?
There is, but I feel like I prefer some of the other running backs in the Kansas City and Cincinnati game more. And I also like Cam Akers for the Rams, so I'm leaning more towards those guys over Mitchell at this point.
Okay. Yeah, Mitchell continues to get huge touches in terms of carries. Not really involved in the passing game though, so that does limit his upside a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. And it is a tough matchup here against the Rams.
Yeah.
Fournette was able to score 2 on the ground. He caught 9 for 56, but that was catch up the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
And they just don't throw it to Mitchell
Right.
like Tampa has thrown it to Fournette.
Sure.
All right, let me hit the Ram side here and get going there with the home squad. Stafford, pretty impressive against Tampa Bay. He threw for 366 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and he ran one in. But in this matchup, he has struggled. He's thrown 2 interceptions in each of the games. He has not thrown for over 250 yards. San Fran's a pretty tough defense across the board. I do like the matchup a little bit better through the air for some of these receivers, primarily Kupp.
Yeah.
And no big surprise, Kupp has been excellent against San Fran in both games. 11 for 122 and then 7 for 118 and a score, coming off a monster game against Tampa, 9 for 183 and his touchdown. I mean, it's just eye-popping. He just does it almost every single week. He is ultra expensive, though. I do like him, though. I do plan to have him in the majority of my lineups. The other pass catchers here, OBJ really trending up, becoming more involved than Van Jefferson. I guess he's one way to get sort of a more balanced lineup where instead of paying up for Kupp and Debo and Hill, if you go to somebody like OBJ, then the rest of your lineup is pretty solid.
Yeah.
But in general, I don't think I'm going to go to two receivers for the Rams. When in doubt, I really do want to lean towards exposure in the first game over this one.
Yeah.
But Higbee is another way to get exposure to this game, save some money. 3,700 on DraftKings jumps out at me.
Yeah.
5,500 on FanDuel is solid. Somehow he's really excelled against the Niners. He caught 1 touchdown the first game, 2 touchdowns against them the second game. And if you just look at the numbers, this is why we dig in. San Fran is 8th toughest matchup for tight ends, but they've had a really easy schedule. They haven't faced Kelsey or Waller or Andrews, and of course they haven't faced Kittle because he's on San Fran. So some might say the top 4 tight ends they haven't faced, but Higbee's done excellent against them. Really involved again last week. Blanton, here's the cautionary piece there, though. He got a touchdown last week against Tampa, so does he vulture a touchdown from Higbee? That's a possibility. And then with the running game here, let's talk about Cam Akers because he's certainly just completely taken over from Sony Michel. He got 24 carries against Tampa, but he only got 48 yards and he fumbled twice. He did catch 3 for 20 yards. Now, the 2 yards per carry, it doesn't really concern me that much because Tampa has such an incredible run defense. But, the fumbles aren't ideally what you want. It's another pretty tough matchup. But 5,000 on DraftKings is, I think, worth a look. So I'm kind of back and forth on Akers. I do like CEH better than him for 5,300, I think. I like Akers' roll better. But, I think that's where I'm leaning right now. But you seem to have some interest in Akers. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I do like Akers. He was targeted how many times was he targeted last week?
He had 3 receptions. I don't have the target number in front of me.
Okay. But yeah, in the passing game, I think that we saw that with Aaron Jones a little bit last week, where they would dump it off to him and he had some success in that passing game. So I could see Akers doing something similar to that. Yeah,
he really did. That's a good stat. That one jumped out for sure. Well, I kind of ran through all those pass catchers, and you didn't weigh in there. Any thoughts on Cup and company?
Yeah, definitely Cooper Cup. Probably one of my top plays this weekend for sure. And Tyler Higbee. I mean, he's had a lot of success, like you said. He had that last time they played, he had that injury, and it looked like he was going to be done for the day. And then he goes out and catches 2 touchdowns after that. So that was pretty crazy. But yeah, Higbee and Cup for sure.
Okay, excellent. Well, it's going to be a lot of fun, even if it doesn't live up to the 4 games from last weekend. I think it's going to be an awesome Sunday, and we can't wait to finalize these lineups for the members. So jump in with us if you'd like, dfscoachtalk.com. Again, any questions, reach out to us on Twitter at dfscoachtalk. And then, before you know it, we'll have a Super Bowl show that we'll have to get ready for, Crash.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that. Still getting over my pain and my wounds from last week, but I'll be there.
Yeah, the best way to deal with that is just dive into the slate for the next week.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. Thank you again for tuning in and joining us here. Check out all of our podcasts the rest of the week and hit the thumbs up if you don't mind. And we'll be back again for the Super Bowl show for sure as we look to crush it in DFS.